The proverb means you can buy a house with money, but a truly good neighbor is far more valuable and much harder to obtain. Material wealth can secure property, but the kindness, civility, trust, and daily cooperation that make a home livable are social goods you cannot simply purchase. In other words, investing in relationships and community often yields greater long-term value than investing only in things. Miles bought the apartment because it was practical, a compact two-bedroom on the 6th floor with a balcony that faced the river, a reasonable commute to a studio, and a kitchen that, with a little elbow grease, would finally stop mocking him for relying on takeout. He told himself he had bought serenity, the kind real estate listings whispered about when they promised quiet neighborhood and friendly community. He pictured evenings with a book, coffee cooling beside him, the city's hum filtered into something distant and manageable. On move-in day, the elevator stalled for 5 minutes with a moving truck idling outside. The staircase smelled of cleaning solution and an unfamiliar spice. A woman in paint-splattered overalls stepped out of 6B carrying a potted succulent, 6B, wiped her hands, and laughed at the elevator's stubbornness like it had been a joke they shared each morning. Her name was Anna. Across the hall, Mr. Gupta in 6A dropped a bag of flour that burst like an awkward confession and made the floor look like a winter disaster. 6A. A teenage boy from 7C hovered in the doorway, 7C, tucking his skateboard behind his legs and offering a hand. They were ordinary people in ordinary states of being, hurried, patient, flustered, generous in tiny increments. Miles discovered quickly that the fiscal cost of his unit had been only a fraction of what he'd actually bought. Power outages, a broken package lock, a stray cat who developed the building's common area as its own sovereign nation. These were the moments that called for more than duct tape and receipts. They required gestures, a language of small favors. At first, he resisted the work of neighborliness. He was used to transactions that came with invoices and receipts and itemized warranties. A person would not fit on a balance sheet. But neighborhood life demanded something different: attention, repetition, vulnerability in forms that were not dramatic but cumulative. He learned to return a borrowed drill without remarking on it. He learned that Mrs. Liao from 5D liked her front door plant pruned into particular patience, 5D. And so he learned to ask rather than assume. He came to recognize that the price of daily friction, the noise of thin walls, the late-night laughter, the mystery of someone's lost keys was met not by avoidance but by small, reciprocal investments. One winter, a heat pump failed for the whole floor. The building manager announced repairs, but gave an estimate like a distant meteor. It would be weeks. The communal email thread flickered between terse complaints and resigned acceptance. Miles expected the thread to decide the matter, to produce instructions and an allocation of responsibility. Instead, Anna took 3 electric kettles down the hall and set up a temporary tea station in the lobby. Mr. Gupta brought down spices and flatbread. The skateboarder from 7C traced the route to the nearest hardware store and offered to pick up space heaters. 7C. It was not that any single contribution solved everything. It was that the contributions reshaped their relationship to the problem. It stopped being an abstract inconvenience and became a thing they shared, narratively and practically. Gradually, the building's rhythm shifted. People began to notice enough to step outside. They planted a small patch on the roof, a jumble of herbs and tomatoes that taught them about patience and the slow, public art of tending. When the tomatoes ripened, nobody claimed a single one as property. They became a currency for conversations. The skateboarder offered a repair lesson to a child who had been too shy to knock on doors. Mrs. Liao taught the group to fold origami cranes for a birthday party. The good neighborliness was not heroic. It was pedestrian and persistent. The kind of daily attention that smooths edges and thickens trust. Miles discovered another truth: investing in neighbors was not purely altruistic. His nights were quieter because someone knocked before testing a drum set. His packages arrived intact because a stranger paused to take them inside when the carrier left them wet under the eaves. When he was anxious about a client pitch, Anna brewed ginger tea and said, "Anna, talk it through." When the pitch failed and he couldn't sleep, Mr. Gupta offered a bowl of lentils and a listening ear. The returns were intangible, but they were real, a buffer against loneliness. A network of small offices where life's administrative burdens could be shared. Philosophically, the building taught him about what it meant to hold value. Markets price tangibles well: square footage, appliances, floor-to-ceiling windows. They do a poor job of pricing the slow accumulation of goodwill, the kind that emerges from consistent, low-stakes care. Good neighbors are a public good in miniature, non-rival and hard to exclude. One person's kindness increases the returns for others without diminishing their own. The apartment sticker price was a line item. The human capital around it was a living ledger that appreciated and uneven. Human ways. There were tensions, because human systems are never perfectly fair. A dispute over shared storage. A festival that spilled noise into a midnight study session. The occasional miscommunication. These moments required patience and repair. They taught Miles the ethics of small apologies, the power of listening, and the value of admitting partial responsibility. He became adept at naming discomfort before it calcified and at narrating his needs without embossing them on everyone else. The community wasn't an unbroken utopia. It was a practice field for civility. In time, Miles stopped thinking of his purchase as merely an asset. He would walk home and see the rooftop garden's net of trellises backlit by sunset. People clustered over a crate of ripe tomatoes, laughing in the way that made the city feel less anonymous. He would overhear a conversation about a job opening, a study group arranging hours, someone helping another fill out a government form. Interventions were small, but they multiplied, and they began to feel like a kind of social infrastructure fragile. Yes, but also reparable. The lesson nested quietly: wealth can buy a space, but worth is created by care. A good neighbor is a collaborator in daily life, a guardian of small routines, a partner in the otherwise unmonetized project of being human together. Miles still noticed the market value of his apartment. Of course, he had bought smart, but the richer accounting was the one where kindness accrued interest. One evening, Anna spread a blanket on the roof and invited everyone up for tea. They brought cups, mismatched chairs, jars of something sweet. The lights of the river threw a soft stripe across the city. No big speeches, no formal ceremony, just people slowing down into a shared moment and recognizing what they had already built, not just a set of units in a building, but a neighborhood in miniature, stitched together by attention and small acts of reciprocity. Miles lifted his cup and realized that the real investment had been ongoing all along. He had spent his money on walls and windows, but had found, without seeking to, a community that made those walls into a home. The rooftop, with its humble tomatoes and warm laughter, felt like a ledger finally balanced.